Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's NTAC session entitled Minds Matter, Strategies for Supporting Students with Mental Health Challenges in School. We are so happy you're taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to go over with you. And we'd love to learn more about where you are, your organization, and your role. So if you could put in the chat your name and your organization and your role and where you're located, so we get a sense of who's here today, that would be awesome. As part of our session, we must provide you with this disclaimer. This presentation was prepared by NTAC under a cooperative agreement with SAMHSA. While this event is supported by SAMHSA, the contents are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of SAMHSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. As part of our session, we must provide you with this disclaimer. This presentation, just kidding. Where's my security script? In the case of any security issues that may occur, this session will immediately end and will not resume using the same join link. A separate email will be sent to all participants with further instructions. Thank you again for attending one of our NTAC sessions. Listed here are all of our incredible national partners that have come together to utilize their expertise and their subject matter knowledge to help inform the field by creating products, resources, and sessions like this one to enhance the behavioral and mental health fields. As a center, our vision is that all children, youth, and families living with and impacted by mental health challenges will have access to the resources and opportunities they need to thrive in a comprehensive and equitable system of care. We serve a wide cross-sector audience, including everyone from state leaders to providers, to school workforce, infant and early childhood providers, community-based providers, peer supervisors, family partners, youth partners, and much more. Our services range from individual consultation to more in-depth sessions like the one we are offering today, to peer learning exchanges and tools to help you. Our aim is to really create those outlets for communication, collaboration, and resource sharing amongst all of us. Please also make sure to check out all our resources and archived presentations on our website, or go to the Contact Us link there to request consultation or training. Before we get started, we wanted to address some commonly asked questions that come up during our sessions to let you know before we get started some answers to these questions. In the follow-up email for today's session, you will receive a certificate of completion, a link to the recording of the session, and a copy of the slide deck presentation that's being shown. You should have also received a copy of the slide deck in the reminder email that was sent earlier today, if you would like to access it for today's session. We will also send out notes that are taken during the session of the case that is discussed and some of the resources and recommendations that were made. That we've made it good housekeeping items. We want to welcome you again today to our session, Minds Matter, Strategies for Supporting Students with Mental Health Challenges in School. Our session today is on autism. And I'm just looking at the chat too to see where people are coming from. We've got people from New Hampshire, Oregon. I'm in DC. Albany. Nice. So people from all over. That's awesome. Good to see everyone here. I am Olivia Hamra. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. I also work through the MedStar Center for Wellbeing in School Environments as a psychiatrist within the schools, providing a psychiatry clinic and also consultation. I'm also a former teacher in DC public schools. So I bring that side of it here today too. And then I'll have Brooke introduce herself.
Good morning / afternoon. My name is Brooke Baker. I am currently Special Education Coordinator at DC Prep Public Charter School. but I've been in education for over 20 years, everywhere from a paraprofessional to now SPED coordinator, everywhere from adult education to elementary school. So I like children, and I definitely love to advocate and learn about students with disabilities. I'm excited for today. Thank you.
All right, today we are going to start out with the mood check-in. Then we're going to do some breakout pairs for introductions and a very easy icebreaker exercise. We're going to talk about autism and what that might look like and how we might support kids with autism in schools. And then hopefully one of you will present a case that they're working with in a school so that we can all put our heads together and help support a child who you're working with. All right, so we're going to start out with how are you feeling? I want you to choose an emoji that you think represents your mood today and put it in the chat so we can get a sense of where everyone's at today. I'm picking the calm, happy. Ooh, smiling turtle. That's awesome. Oh, Mariah's feeling cool. Diana and Stacy have some attitude today. Some good. Okay. Awesome. My hope is that everyone's in a place to learn and also looking forward to the weekend. So it's Friday. Okay. To get our, to get ourselves going, I want to split us up into pairs. So we're going to have everyone grouped in pairs. And I want you to just introduce yourselves to your partner, and you can answer this question or you can talk about something else. But what was the highlight of your week? And we'll just give you like 2 to 3 minutes to start chatting, turn your cameras on so that we can get going for today. So Joanne, I'll have you do the breakout rooms now. All right, I think we've got people coming back from breakout rooms, which is good. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you all got to know each other a little bit better. And I'm just going to start our little didactic piece of the presentation today. So hopefully we'll have some good time for discussion later. Today, Brooke and I are going to be talking about autism. And I'm just going to start out with kind of like my perspective as a psychiatrist, and then Brooke's going to talk about more things that like practical ways that you can help kids with autism in schools. So let's get going. I'll start off by introducing my son, Marcus. He's 5. I'm not just talking about this through the perspective of a psychiatrist. I'm also a mom of a child with autism. And you wouldn't know by looking at him or even talking to him for maybe 5 minutes, but the more you get to know him, I think the more you realize that he really can only talk about trains. But he has autism, and so I kind of have this lived experience too and going through it. So what is autism spectrum disorder? There's actually a couple definitions of autism, and Brooke is going to get to that a little bit later too. I'm going to share with you the medical definition. So this is how we would diagnose autism in a medical setting, and for other like medical supports. So there's 2 big categories in terms of the diagnosis of autism. The first one is deficits in social communication and social interaction. It has to be across multiple contexts, and it has to meet these 3 criteria. One, deficits in social emotional reciprocity. So that's like normal back and forth conversation, sharing of interests, emotions, or affect, like the way that your emotion is presented on your face, or even failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. The second thing is deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction. So that's like eye contact, body language, gesturing, or even like again, your facial expression. Deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So that can be like adjusting your behavior for whatever context you're in, sharing in that imaginative play as a child, or being able to make friends. Or sometimes it's the absence of interest in peers. The second category is restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. And for this one, you have to have at least 2 of these 4 criteria. Stereotyped or repetitive movements, use of objects, or speech. So that's where you would think of things like hand flapping or those kinds of movements, rocking back and forth. Those are like motor stereotypies, but then it can also be things like repetitive lining up of toys, doing a certain something with objects. Echolalia is like repeating back speech exactly the way that you hear it, or having these kind of like idiosyncratic phrases that are used again and again. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. So it's like that real rigidity in thinking, and that can look like difficulties in transitions, a lot of distress even when there's really small changes, having certain rituals that you have to go through, like in terms of eating or greeting people or just doing day-to-day activities. The third thing is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. So being like really attached to something, really preoccupied with something, very perseverative interests. So those are signs of autism. And then hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. So sometimes it can be really sensitive, like being really sensitive to certain textures or like the way things feel. It can be sounds, like being really sensitive to loud sounds or certain pitches of sounds. Or it can also just be like really being really into the sensory experience of certain things, like holding things very close to your face, or smelling things or touching things in a certain way, being like very fascinated with the sensory experiences. So those are the 2 big categories: the social deficits in social communication, and restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. And then you can classify autism on this spectrum of severity. And typically people refer to that spectrum as level 1, level 2, and level 3, depending on how much support the child needs. And so this is kind of like a table. This is not spelled out in the DSM-5, like the manual that we use to diagnose autism. It's just something that's really commonly used to classify these symptoms. About 1 in 36 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder. The prevalence of autism has been rising over the years. It's more common now than it was before. Autism is reported to occur in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups, but it's 4 times more common in boys compared to girls. About a third of children with autism also have an intellectual disability. So intellectual disability is not a part of the diagnosis of autism, but it is often comorbid. Other comorbidities with autism: anxiety disorders, depression, ADHD, epilepsy, GI issues like stomach issues, and insomnia. Those are all really common comorbidities with autism, and things that are important to know for a child when they're in school during the day. Autism also comes with a lot of strengths. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it means that the way people with autism think is different from the way neurotypical people think, and that can be a really good thing sometimes. They're much more likely to be intellectually gifted than a child without autism, or have savant syndrome, which would be like an extreme like differential between the things, their strengths and their weaknesses. Excellent memories, tend to be quick problem solvers, and really have the ability to make rational decisions. Don't let that they don't often let that emotion mind get in the way of decision making, which can be good sometimes. They really can have an ability to hyper focus, recognize patterns well, think outside the box, and have a strong work ethic. So autism can come with a lot of strengths, and it's important to remember that. In terms of screening and diagnosis for autism, the MCHAT is a standard autism screening tool that parents are asked to fill out by their pediatricians at 18 and 24 months. So this is something that should be done for kids by their pediatricians. Often schools do it too. Like preschool, early daycares or that kind of thing will send an MCHAT home. There's other screening skills, but most of them are not really validated. So they're not really like a first-line screening tool outside of the MCHAT. The only other one that's validated is called the ASSQ, which is a parent report or teacher report scale for kids who are between the ages of 7 and 16. So that's one that's kind of good to know about too, just for the older kids. But otherwise, it's this MCHAT and then a diagnostic evaluation by a clinician. So like, for example, if I saw somebody and they met all of those criteria that I listed, I could diagnose them with autism. Or there's also a formal diagnostic exam called the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, or an ADOS, which is like the gold standard diagnosis way to diagnose autism. And this is what, if I'm thinking about like an older child with like a level 1 autism, or even an adult, if we really want to confirm that, I would send them to get an ADOS. Once a child is diagnosed with autism, usually there's other evaluations that are recommended, depending on how that child presents and if there's other delays or other concerns. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, neuropsychological testing. That's where you can see if there's other like comorbid learning disorders or intellectual delay. And that really helps you determine supports, because the big thing that we know with autism is that early intervention is key. The earlier kids can get the support that they need, the better they will do. And even for kids where their biggest deficits are just in that like social communication range, if they can learn, those are skills that can be learned. Just because a lot of people, most people have them inherently, doesn't mean that these kids can't learn those skills. And the earlier they can learn them, the better they do. It's really important to know, like coming from a psychiatrist, that there's no medication that treats autism. So kids with autism that are on medication, it's not treating autism. The most important thing is therapy. Early applied behavioral analysis is the standard of care for kids who are diagnosed early and has really good outcomes. Also, if there's, let's say, like comorbid ADHD, depression, or anxiety, you might want to consider executive function skills training, CBT. Training in social pragmatics can be really helpful. And then for kids who have a lot of those like sensory sensitivities, there's a subset of occupational therapy called sensory motor integration therapy, which is also like really directed towards those kinds of deficits. There are 2 medications that are FDA approved for irritability in children with autism. They are risperidone and aripiprazole. These are atypical antipsychotic medications. When I see these prescribed, my thought is that there must be behavior that is considered to be like very disruptive or dangerous. And so it needs to be managed in some way by a medication as behavior therapy is ongoing. And I would never assume that these medications are going to be continued long term. And I just want to throw in here, this is like a common phrase for people who see kids with autism, is that if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. It really is a spectrum. And there's so many different ways that those like criteria that I listed can present. And so it's really just all about being flexible and knowing the child and supporting them how you can support them. I'm going to hand it over to Miss Brooke.
And I'm so sorry because, of course, once it's my turn, my dog starts barking. The luxury and the downfall of being at home. So thank you so much, Dr. Hamra. Talking about like the medical side of things, I wrote a whole bunch of notes because I learned some things while you were speaking, so I appreciate that. I'm definitely coming from the education side of things. Currently in my role as the special education coordinator at DC Prep. We are a school that is very much an inclusion school. The majority of our classrooms are co-taught with 2 teachers, a special education teacher and a general ed teacher in the classroom. So we are servicing what I'm guessing is probably close to your like level 1, level 2-ish students when I looked at your level system there. And I'm only speaking from this kind of like an inclusion in the gen ed setting point of view and what things have worked in my school and with my special education teachers and with our population. I know that there's a whole other subset and different characteristics that come around, but where I'm coming from, this is what I've seen and what I've seen has worked. If you want to switch the thingy. And Dr. Hammer had a lot of like the DSM criteria for the mental health diagnosis. This is just this is from the OSSI Office of State Superintendent of Education in DC, but I think that this is the same criteria for a disability worksheet. If I saw a lot of people are RNs, I'm not sure if there's many teachers here, but this is definitely like teacher facing stuff. For a student to get an IEP for ASD, autism spectrum disorder, they have to just meet this very top blue one criteria, where they have a developmental disability affecting verbal and nonverbal communication, social interaction, that impacts or affects the child's educational performance. So things that kind of mirror the DSM, where you're talking about the social interactions, are on there, but biggest thing is like that it adversely affects the child's education, because there are also students at my school, I was telling Dr. Hammer before everybody jumped on, that like have a medical diagnosis for ASD, but do not meet the educational criteria for it and will not get an IEP for it because it doesn't affect their educational performance. The other things that kind of go underneath it are very similar to what Dr. Hammer talked about with the DSM, interacting, speech or communications struggles, the unusual or repetitive motions, abnormalities in thought or processing skills, those kind of things. These are all just parts of the criteria for the to get an IEP for a student with ASD. You'll learn more about what this looks like. This is all just, checking the box to get him the IEP or him or her the IEP. And then what comes up next is what do we do now? Not let the dog bark at everything. I kind of picked out like the top, like the highest, like I see in the inclusion setting. PDP. I'm so sorry. He's very cool, I promise. This is ridiculous. The idea of maintaining relationships or like establishing relationships is often found with students with ASD, was a DSM criteria, and also it's on the disability worksheet. Things that you can do as a teacher, or if you're a friend that like, maybe there's a lot of nurses I saw in the room, but I'm sure you know teachers and you work in education settings, things like buddy systems, where they're with a friend that can help them through the day, and you can kind of have them like, that can be a whole system where you can build it out, where I've done it before, or you can just be very strategic of what groups you're putting in students with, or where they're sitting out in the classroom. Are they with a friend that's going to be very supportive, that has, maybe experience with this? We have a student that her older brother is on the spectrum, and then there's a student that's on the spectrum in her class, and she is a great buddy because she has such like so much experience working with students that have some similar struggles or working with her family members. And she's a great buddy to her friend in her class. You're going to see a lot about social stories, something that I did not know much about until most recently. But anytime you look up anything on education, as it relates to ASD, you're going to hear about social stories. I'm going to give you a resource at the end for that. That's like my favorite, but just also like putting them in, making them kind of be together. This is an example of a social circle, but like being strategic as an educator of group projects and partnering to make sure that they feel included and they can be included with people that, are tolerant and inclusive minded, I guess. People, I mean children, because not everybody has the same experience. So you want to set them up for success. You can go to the next one now that my dog is being quiet. The idea of rigidity in routines, which again, DSM, we heard about a lot of stuff that has to do with rigidity, but also like you're going to see it. Change is hard for us as neurotypical. It's extremely hard for friends that are on the spectrum. Things that you can do, and this is not, I mean, this is just good teacher moves, but very imperative when you're setting up a student with ASD for success. Visual schedules, making sure that you're letting them know what's going to happen beforehand through social stories. There's that social story thing again. We have a friend that we send home social stories anytime something new is coming up. Like, hey, I have a change in schedule for testing tomorrow. Here's the social story. Can you go over it with so-and-so at home? And then choice boards, allowing them to select from predetermined options. That can be educational, that can be breaks, that can be incentive based, but anything we're kind of like, these are all the choices you can have, all will meet the objective, all will get us to the end goal, but which way do you kind of want to move around with it? That kind of helps set them up for success and having that feeling of autonomy while not having to be so rigid, although sometimes in a classroom things can be very structured. I see the thing is on first then, which is once I learned about first we do this, then we can do that. It's a very much a strategy for students with ASD, but it's also just a good strategy for any child that you're trying to, have them do something before they get everything that they want. You can go to the next one. Just the challenges in social communication. I heard Dr. Hammer say, early intervention is key. I also have a niece that's on the spectrum who was developmentally delayed at first and got a lot of early intervention for communication. And like she did that through these kinds of things like explicit instruction, teaching them how we should do this, using different social stories or videos or examples of how to do that. Having peers kind of mediate and discuss things so that way it's more like accessible for students on the spectrum. And then also like social skills or lunch bunch groups where like, sometimes, at least in my school, sometimes these friends in big social settings, they can become very introverted. But if you say, let's have a lunch bunch, do you want to have a friend or two come have lunch with us? And it's not, as an adult, I actually don't have to run much of anything. I'm just kind of sitting there enjoying my lunch while I can see kids interacting where they might not get that on that big that practice of how to communicate socially when it's the 20 or 30 kids in the lunchroom versus 2 or 3 friends that they're choosing that they can kind of practice some of those skills with. If you want to move to the next one, there's only 3 more left, I promise. The idea of unconventional use of or limited of language. So I know that in my school we do not have students that use assistive technology because all of our students are verbal and use their words most of the time, not all of the time. However, we do use visual supports for friends. We have a friend on the spectrum who also has a specific profile where he becomes nonverbal when frustrated or when demands are put on him, where we have him pointing to things, or we'll have him, I bought like the little yes or no buttons because we were just trying to figure out what to do, and he enjoyed that, and we could give him some choices. But it's all about like figuring out how, like, we may want them to say these words to communicate because that's what the social norm is, but at the end of the day, if they're not in that space, but you still want to help them solve their problem, or you still want to help them get their needs met, like different things like choice boards, there's like apps that are free for real. I just use Google Slides and copy pasted pictures into things to make it so way, these are the choices you have, or, you know, I need a break, or I'm ready, not ready, mood boards, those kind of things where like if a kid, you know, can't communicate that he's really not in a space right now to have certain demands put on him, he can communicate it through a mood board or one of those temperature checks. But it's being visual and being accepting of pointing to it or being accepting of writing a note is all acceptable and helpful for friends that maybe have that limited verbal language. You can go to the next one.
And I'm just going to quickly comment here too, that one thing that I hear sometimes is concern that like a speech generating device will delay the development of language. And that's just not true. As they are developing language through like speech therapy and interactions with people, it's also really important that they are learning and developing socially, and that's where the speech generating device can be really, really helpful. And so I always say if that's what they need, then that's what they should have, and it's not going to delay any development of language. So just wanted to add that in there.
Yes, thank you, because there definitely is pushback sometimes, especially if it's one of the communication AC, the ones that look like iPads. Like, I don't want my kid on iPad all day. Well, we also want your kid to be able to communicate what they need. So like, we have had pushback with that as well. And then we usually try to take something not technology wise, which is not as helpful, but you know, parents, you know, you want to make sure that they feel comfortable too in what their kids are getting at school. You can go sensory sensitivities. I saw that in the DSM when Dr. Hamill was talking about that. This is definitely something that you as people know about this a little bit. All I gotta say is noise canceling headphones, noise canceling headphones, noise canceling headphones. Buy them in bulk, keep them, because they're not just, I mean, they're helpful for students with ASD, but they're helpful for a lot of students that get distracted with background noise. And that's real, especially when you talk about the comorbidity with the different diagnoses that come along with it. A lot of times in my setting, it's students have ADHD or anxiety and autism, and they'll wear the headphones. That's true. Flexible seating, you'll see kind of in the middle. I am very pro flexible seating. I just want to, if any friends out here are like, oh, I want to try it, or know somebody like, oh, flexible seating does work. Kids love flexible seating, and you need to have rules and structure around it before you just let kids sit wherever. So just make sure but that's really helpful. Like, especially if there's, you know, ADHD or something, sometimes it's just difficult to sit down. And why do they have to sit down in a seat the same way everybody else is? If they're learning and they're not harming anybody else, I'd prefer them to be able to sit where they can feel comfortable. Fidgets, I also love fidgets. Some people are against them. Again, having rules for it, having a system for it, not just everybody gets a toy and now you don't have to learn. It's more of like having something in your hands. I very much like when I do teacher in-person things, I put fidgets all on desks and teachers are, you know, playing with the fidgets in their hands while they're learning. And then I question like, okay, well, let's put them in the classroom now, since you know that it's helpful. In the bottom, you kind of see these things. These are the fluorescent light covers. There's several different types of them, different things. Just very helpful with like not having that fluorescent light in on the children if they have sensory issues. The shameless plug for a lot of these things, because these are things that you actually kind of have to buy, or your school has to buy, or someone has to buy. I am in some Facebook groups, maybe showing my age, but it's like teacher deals, Amazon teacher deals. If you're a Facebook person, group person, look them up, because there's deals all the time. You get them very, very inexpensive options. But I always go to my Facebook teacher group Amazon deals. I encourage everyone to find them, because these are super helpful, and kids, you know, they're helpful, and kids will indulge in them because they also enjoy them. I think this is the last one coming up, I believe. Oh, I think there might be another one. Engagement in the repetitive behaviors or movements, the stimming that's going to happen, that may happen, may not, depending on the student and where they fall. But just the idea of understanding what the function is. Are they, you know, rocking back and forth because they like just want you to say stop rocking back and forth, or are they rocking back and forth because it's a sensory thing? And if so, like flexible seating. Are they, you know, doing something with their hands because they'd rather do that or look at their hands instead of doing work because they're avoiding it? Or is it a sensory issue thing? If it's sensory, then there are things that you can put into place that were kind of on the last one, that you can get that same sensory input while not like disengaging from learning. Teaching like the replacement behaviors, and then also reinforcing them, not bribing them, like if you don't do this then I'll give you this, but like there's a difference. You just have to set it up so they know what the expectation is, because when they know the expectation, then they'll come to it, instead of like at the end, like I really just need you to stop rocking, or if you don't rock for this long, instead of just like getting them something where they can rock and learn at the same time proactively, and then saying, hey, you completed your work. let's if you complete your work, then if then statements. It's very helpful. I think there's one more that's very similar to this. Okay, no, there's not. This is the hookup. I hope that there's a few teachers in here that may not know about this yet. But if you are anywhere in education or know anyone in education, I do not work for this place or this app, but it is a beautiful app called Magic School or Magic Teacher AI. And yes, I did say AI. Some people are for it. I'm very much for it. Some people are against it. However, if you go to the next slide, Dr. Hamra, this is why I would say you should try it. Again, Magic Teacher AI or Teacher Magic School AI. These are all the different functions, not all. These are the specific functions that I thought would be helpful for this group, that literally AI will do right for you. When you're talking about, what did Dr. Hammer, you said your son like loves trains, right? So I'm going to do things that have to do with trains. Like I'm going to integrate that into what's going on. So I might do it in where it says make it relevant. Like that's just one thing where you can like write in kindergartner, trains, DC, exploring, and like they will give you like relevant ideas. Or if you'd like talk about your topic, they'll like give you all these ideas that you could implement into your teaching that makes it relevant. So now this kid, you might be talking about, I don't know, the solar system, but somehow transportation and trains can be put into it to try to, indulge in their preferred situation as well as what you're learning. In the bottom right is social stories. It is just the easiest thing ever in life. Like fourth grader ASD. We're having a fire drill in the morning, and the child doesn't like fire drills, and it'll like literally write up, you can even put the child's name in it and it'll write up a whole social story for them, so you can kind of review what the expectations are and what like it looks like. Group work generator, if I saw earlier, it was like have them do groups, strategic, but like you might be a teacher's like, we don't even do group work that much. You can put in whatever your focus is, your objective, and do group work. It'll make it for you. You don't like literally 30 seconds. A BIP generator. This is not a BIP, like a formal FBA BIP generator. This is, you just put in your information and it'll help you with some different strategies in the classroom for this student and how to work with them. And then the other one, choice board. Again, like you're like, well, this is what the students are doing. And the students can do that. And you could put it like your Common Core standards or whatever your objective and topic is in this UDL choice board generator, and it'll make several different choices where the child, it may be an expectation for like neurotypical students to write this 5-page essay or essay or whatever, but that doesn't mean that's the only way to show mastery of a standard or a skill. Giving them choices will help them be able to show what they know and be able to learn in the process. These are just, I'm just really pushing, if you're in education or know anyone in education, this is, and I don't work for them, although I would love to. This is just the motherlode of all things education facing that really has been helpful for me. Although I'm the special education coordinator, I very much am heavily involved in the programming and the everyday of all our students with IEPs. And I'm often referring back to this for resources. It might be the last one for me. Oh, comments, questions, discussion. So that's me. I'm going to pass it back to you, Dr. Hammer. Thank you guys. And thank you everybody for listening. Google Magic Teacher AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone, before we get to a case, does anyone have questions about the information that we just went over? Okay. Well, then I would like to have somebody here, hopefully, as you were hearing some of the things we were talking about, there were students who came to mind, maybe because that would be helpful to talk about. If there's a student who's on your mind who you need support with and they don't have autism, that's fine too. It can be anybody. But I would love to hear from somebody so we can kind of go through a real world case, and help support them. Well, and somebody's got to have someone to talk about.
If no one else has something, I have a student I can talk about.
All right, go ahead. Thank you, Kirsten.
Sorry, I went last week, so I don't want to take up all the space.
I don't see anyone else. Does anyone else have somebody they want to talk about? You can go for it, Kirsten.
Okay, I'll go for it. So I'm thinking about a little guy that I work with who is in first grade. Most of his day is spent in a mod to severe classroom. He's nonverbal. He's been working on using a communication device. Let's see. I see him as a physical therapist because they wanted to have a goal for him that was related to playing an interactive game with another student. So either something physical on the playground or something physical in the building. I think my question is kind of like my next steps for him. So I'm excited to report that there was no way that he was going to, so we couldn't do the playground because it just was too much free space and he just ran all over the place. So I decided that I'd bring him back in the room where there was some structure, and I started playing ball with him. And it just took like 2 weeks, and then he caught on to it and was interested in catching the ball. I was surprised, I was really excited and surprised. And so he would play catch with me, and then there are other kids on the other side of the room behind a barrier, and they always would walk by. So I would kind of periodically try to get one of them to come and join us. And it was fascinating because initially he did not want any other kid to join us. And so what we did is I had his aide stand next to him while he was playing catch with me first. And then we got him so he could play catch without the aide next to him. And then let's see what happened next. Then I tried to bring in another student and he refused and just shut down. What I did is I had the other student the next week stand right next to him, so she wasn't facing him. And eventually, like, I think it probably took 2 weeks, and then he engaged in playing catch with her. So, I think I have questions about like what could, not so much me as a physical therapist, but kind of like as a school, what could we do to promote his engagement with other students? So he's got a lot of sensory. He is in a classroom with other kids, and he does have some inclusion time, but it's hard for him.
Before I jump into anything or Brooke jumps into anything, does anyone here have any ideas, thoughts, or even questions about this kid to help get us started?
Is there anything that he's like really good at and confident in that maybe he would enjoy at some point? through a lot of shaping and reinforcement, is there something he's really good at that he would enjoy showing others, and that might help build his confidence with his peers?
I can honestly say, because I just have only been working with him for like this half of the year. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I can't think of anything, but I don't know him well enough to know that for sure. But that's a great idea, is to find out what he's good at.
Yeah, really great question, Jennifer. That's really important.
I'm wondering if you know if there's siblings in the house, and if there is siblings, like are they close in age? What does interaction look like with them at home?
Yeah, and I don't know, but I know he has I know he has a sister, and I'm pretty sure she's also on the spectrum. And yeah, and I think I'm not sure how they interact, but I got like a little peek possibly into it, because after we were playing one of these last week, we're playing catch, and the little girl decided, who he was playing with, decided she was going to tickle him, and he loved it. And I asked him, I said, do you want her to tickle you again? And he signed more, and so we had kind of that was really, really lovely. um yeah, but I don't know. I'm
That's
open to all
sounds like
ideas.
this girl in his class is a really sweet girl.
I know, I know.
Are there things that they're doing in the classroom now to have him engage with his peers?
I don't think so. I feel like that's a big missing piece in the curriculum at the school. I think the school, wants to honor inclusion. And so I mean both in his moderate severe classroom and his general ed classroom. So he has gen ed time, but yeah, but I think it's not the strength of this particular school. I can tell you that when he goes to PE with his class, with his in the gen ed setting, he just wanders around. He does not want to do anything structured. And I could imagine, like, it was really hard on the playground for me to work with him. So, and the gymnasium is very, very big. So I can imagine like that doesn't seem like the best place to get him to interact with other kids.
Yeah, it sounds like he needs a structured environment where there's like a planned activity with
Mhm.
other kids.
Mhm.
And even then, like when you had one other child in the back and forth of a ball, it took him a while to really adjust to that. I think that's where something like social stories can be really helpful, like to show him what to expect rather than like surprising him with another kid being in the room or being a part of the activity. Um, really breaking down visually and verbally, like today we're going to go into this room during this time, and this person is going to be there, and you're going to pick up the ball and we're going to throw it back and forth. And that kind of thing might be helpful to kind of ease him into a situation like that. And then having those kinds of like back and forth interactions with other students worked into his day
Mhm.
to help him feel, and in like a kind of activity like I think Jennifer was saying that he feels really confident about or he really enjoys and would want to share with other people.
Yeah.
Those are the like initial thoughts that I have. I'm wondering if other people have things that have worked well for these kids.
That make me think when you said that, like maybe he could have a job of walking to the front office to deliver something, that we have a social story around it, and he can do it with somebody from his gen ed classroom.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic. That's a great idea. Yeah.
I almost wonder, like, is the little girl that has been with him, like, does she get PT hours too? Is that why she was kind of chosen? Or like, did she choose this person, or is there a person that he might choose in his classes?
He didn't choose her, and I got the impression that at first he wasn't excited about her, and then he got a new student, another little girl in his class, and one day I think she just kind of spontaneously joined us. What happens is my room is like a throwaway, so I have all sorts of teachers and kids walking by our space, in our space, through our space, and so that's how that happened with her.
Yeah. The other thing I will say, if he does love those sensory things, like this is kind of a part of like the ABA model, is like, it sounds like he really liked the tickling. Like that can be a reward for having these like interactions. And he got that like naturally in the environment he was, which is perfect. That like he engaged in this behavior back and forth with another student, and then he got this like really wonderful reward that he loves. Like that was like, it sounds like that worked perfectly. But to work in those kinds of rewards too, for when, like after he works in the group, it might be kind of stressful for him, but then knowing that he's going to get this like really awesome reward that he really loves is a good thing to have in place. I'm going to stop the discussion because we only have a couple of minutes left, but thank you again for sharing this case. It's a good one. And I'm glad you're working with him again, like so early, because he has time to develop these skills and to grow and to really like be able to be a part of the community of the school, which is nice. I want to ask you to take a few minutes to fill out, to take one minute as I'm doing closing remarks, to fill out this survey that we have. It'll provide direct feedback to me and to Brooke and to Ariel, who was with us in the other sessions earlier this month. Can we put the link to it in the chat? Or is that something I can do? Let me quickly find it. Okay. Oops. I think I don't know why it's not why is it a picture? There we go. Okay, the link is in the chat. I ask that you fill it out now if you can. And then I'm just going to share my screen again and go through some of these final slides. Sorry. Okay. Thank you everyone here for joining us today. If you missed the beginning of the session, we want to remind you again that you should be on the lookout for a follow-up email that you'll receive. In this email, you'll receive a certificate of completion, a link to the recording of the webinar, and a copy of the slide deck that's being shown. Also, next week, we'll send out some of the notes from the meeting, and some of the recommendations and resources that were shared. Your completion of the survey is an important part of the quality control for NTAC and our future funding of this project. It allows us to continue to provide you with resources and training at no cost. In addition, it allows us to continually improve our services and provide information and resources you're needing in the field. So there will also be a survey in the chat, a different survey now, and one in the email that you receive for NTAC, so that you can give them some feedback as well on this session. If you missed, I also want to ask you to stay connected to us. If you missed the beginning of the session, we have the link to our website here. And we also have our social media accounts as well that you can follow and stay connected with. And then again, here is some contact information and our website so that you can stay connected with NTAC. And I just, again, want to thank everyone here for attending today. Thank you, Ms. Brooke, for sharing all of your wonderful knowledge on how to support kids with autism in schools, and Kirsten for sharing a case that we could discuss. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will hopefully see you all next week for our last session. Bye, everyone.